Richard Avedon. Born in 1923, Richard Avedon was a widely known photographer from New York who produced work heavily around fashion, portraiture, and fine art. His photography work spanned over 50 years and he contributed right until his death in 2004. Avedon's work has been held in several places including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. He found his interest in fashion and art from a very young age, inspired by his parents' clothing business, and at the age of 12 he got into photography by joining a camera club. Before making a photography career, Avedon originally went on to study philosophy and poetry at Columbia University, but withdrew after the first year. During World War II, Avedon in 1942 served as photographer's mate second class in the Merchant Marine. He left 2 years later, and in 1944 he worked as an advertiser photographing for a department store. During this time, he got noticed by Alexei Brodovich, who was an art director at Harper's Bazaar. This fashion magazine was where Avedon started his next work, producing photos of women in different outfits, such as dresses, against plain backdrops and different locations. Avedon afterwards started producing fashion photography for other magazines, including Vogue in 1965, where he worked there for over 2 decades until 1988. Here he produced similar sort of photos, all in the studio, lots of them being black and white. Some of his most iconic works are portraits of really famous celebrities, most notably Andy Warhol, Marilyn Monroe, the Beatles, and Audrey Hepburn, as mentioned on artnet.com. One thing I've noticed about his fashion magazine works is that he liked to shoot individuals more so than groups of 2 or more people. Since he was a fashion photographer, Avedon had a strong attention to minimalism, as he wanted nothing to distract the viewer from the primary main subject of the image, which most of the time was the fashion garments. Adding new subjects and elements would therefore detract from the main subject. In comparison, filmic style photographers take a different approach to fashion style photographers, as their focus is more on telling a narrative and conveying emotion through characters. This means they add as many elements as they can to the composition to represent the character and tell the story further, including locations, objects, and different camera angles. With fashion photography, the main focus is to highlight the specific fashion piece or garment, and the photographer does this by making every element outside of the fashion piece blander and more neutral, including the characters' faces emotionless. A lot of the time they take the midgrounds and backgrounds away from the photos, replacing them with a plain backdrop instead. In Avedon's fashion photos, he experiments with visual techniques in diverse ways to give each image its flavour and stand out as different to all his other works. For instance, in a self-portrait of himself, Avedon uses a spotlight to create hard shadows with defined edges. This is to achieve a strong contrast between the black and the white, which makes the image vibrant. This effect emphasizes the negative space which flattens the image. Avedon, as the subject, uses the headroom rule to keep him fully in frame without any part of him being cut off. The space between the front of his shoes and the edges of frame are equal in size to make him appear more symmetrical, despite the stool being positioned off-center to the left. Avedon's work throughout the years has been varied in terms of what he conveys. In a lot of his earlier fashion works, his main goal was to make each of his subjects appear as glamorous as possible in ways that would complete the image, while still trying to maintain that high level of attention that all the fashion garments required. In a number of these images, he used theatrical expression with his models to empower the images and bring them to life. To support this, he used sterile environments so as to not detract from the subject. On one particular occasion, Avedon shot a photo of celebrity Bob Dylan in 1965, and this photo was taken outside with the pavements and the trees in shot. To avoid Dylan getting lost within the background, he used a technique by applying a shallow depth of field to the background, making Dylan pop out of the shot more. Avedon also used leading lines within the pavement and low-level walls to direct the viewer's attention to the subject matter. The facial expression and posture of Dylan suggest his mood, and the background provides context. What I find interesting about this image is that it's making a well-known subject appear as a normal citizen on the street, and this composition makes him more relatable. One of Avedon's books that he produced includes Nothing Personal from 1964, and this contained a large number of images, even capturing some of his celebrity shots, including Marilyn Monroe on one of the pages. As he became more well known from his career and working with celebrities, Avedon set the standard for what people regarded at the time as beauty and high society. With this said, he became a big influencer of the second half of the 20th century. Although after a certain period of time, Avedon slowly started to become disinterested in fashion and began to head more towards culture and politics. While still working for Vogue, he began a 6-year project in 1979 in which he started capturing photography of American Western figures. The style of these pictures was gritty and authentic with more life in them, highlighting the struggles, strife, and hardships of the people. He captured working class members such as butchers, waitresses, cashiers, housewives, coal miners, and many more. These black and white photos were shot against plain white backdrops outside, eliminating the environment. Some controversial opinions arose from his decision to do this, as people thought the surroundings were just as important in establishing what the American Western figures were going through. I personally disagree with this opinion, as the clothing of the figures, the posture, and the facial expressions are powerful enough in conveying this, and the simplistic style with a plain white background forces the viewer to look at all the small details of a particular person. Avedon shot all these images as if he was doing so in a studio, which was a place he personally preferred taking photos when working on his fashion pictures. One of his quotes says this: "I always prefer to work in the studio. It isolates people from their environment. They become, in a sense, symbolic of themselves." In a large majority of his Western photographs, Avedon captured each image with the light coming straight at them at the front. He chose simple lighting as he wanted the mood to be set by the figures and their gestures, and not by the tone of light. If the lighting faced the viewer from any other angle, then it would generate shadows in different tones, appearing as a main subject itself, influencing what you take away from the image. With the pictures shot the way Avedon has with the light at the front, it allows for the subject to have no distractions, and therefore the simplicity with the white background pays off. One of my personal favourite quotes of his includes, "The pictures have a reality for me that the people don't. It is through the photographs that I know them." To me, this shows he is more enamoured by the story he's telling within the photograph than who the person in it actually is. At the end of the project in 1985, Avedon produced a book titled In the American West, which consisted of 120 pages containing each of the subjects he shot over the 6-year period. This book became so popular that it's extremely hard to get today and goes for hundreds of pounds online. A YouTube video titled The American's West Richard Avedon provides a decent look into the content of the book, and some of the images shown stand out to me in terms of some of the techniques Avedon has used within them. One example I like to highlight includes a photo of a girl in dungarees with loose, messy hair. She is shot from the waist up, giving us a closer view on her visual details since she's taking up 2/3 of the frame. Her as the subject is portrayed slightly off-center, and the crisp, clear perspective we have of her highlights really small details including freckles on the skin and texture within the material of her dungarees. Emotion is conveyed through the eyes, and they are highlighted with the presence of the catchlight in them. The eyes demonstrate that she's tired, and you as a viewer receive the rough states she's been through. This, in comparison to Cindy Sherman's Untitled Film Still series, is just as effective, as it's telling us a story based on the girl's physical conditions. Like Sherman's work, you are able to picture the scenes both before and after the recorded frame, and the simplicity of Avedon's image with the white background allows it to stand out. Sherman's work, including one example, Untitled Film Still No. 2, relies on the environment as Sherman uses it to provide her characters with context, as who she is presenting isn't anybody specific. In this piece, she is holding a towel around herself, looking straight into a mirror with her face reflecting in the shot. She uses the mirror to show the viewers effectively that she is judging what she looks like, and features the sync-in frame to hint at her going to use it to sort her face. Due to her filmic style, the shots are done as if they are moving images, whereas Avedon's pictures leads the viewer out of the film mindset, making us as viewers forget it's an image by only providing us with the character and cutting out everything else. As a result, we see a person and not a photograph. To summarize, both photos achieved their effectiveness well, with one providing context through visual elements of the character's appearance, and one providing context through visual elements surrounding the character.